A manhunt that was, all the resources, Dana, that went out there into looking for him. And this fella who was on the air 20 minutes ago, Ryan Drummond, probably has the story of the day. He's the homeowner who says the other night he heard something in his house. He turned the light on, and Cavalcante turned the light off. And apparently he was looking for provisions to stay alive and maybe some clothing or food. And then Drummond said he grabbed the only thing he could to defend himself, which was a picture of his family, and realized that may not be enough. And that might have been the ultimate tip for authorities to track him down.
He escaped from prison on August 31st, and this was a day after he had been sentenced to life in prison for the killing of his girlfriend back in 2021. So he wanted to get out of the jail. This is a jail that had a similar problem, but that person had been caught. Danilo Cavalcante was not. And that took 2 weeks. Schools had been closed. People were told to stay indoors, lock their cars, make sure that they were keeping themselves safe, all for this guy. And the amount of resources that it took to bring him in is quite astounding. We're going to hear a little bit more about that at 9:30 when there's a press conference, but he is now in custody.
Yeah. So he's wearing a Philadelphia Eagles long sleeve sweatshirt, and we watched him turn his back to authorities as they cut the sweatshirt off and revealed markings on his skin, tattoos, which were clear indicators of his identity. You mentioned a press conference coming up momentarily. We've been watching these press conferences for 2 weeks, but now they have something to say. We did it, we got them, and the schools that have been closed in that area can now reopen without fear. 9:30 Eastern, we'll bring that to you live. Nate Foy, our correspondent, has been in southeastern PA for a couple weeks now. Nate, what do you have? Where are you? What do you see? Hello.
Well, Bill, we are just outside what was the search perimeter actually just about a few minutes ago. We saw some vehicles, some ground crews and aviation teams pull out to the applause of people here. We're just outside of Wawa, where there's been a lot of frustration, but now people are very happy to see that Danilo Cavalcante has been captured. And most importantly, it doesn't appear that anyone was injured in the process of doing it. I can tell you my source with Pennsylvania State Police tells me that Cavalcante was captured very close to that garage where he broke in Monday night and stole that .22 caliber rifle with the scope and flashlight attached to it. And I can tell you that it was Border Patrol teams as well as Pennsylvania State Police that were able to initiate that capture, and that he is now, you saw the video of him being loaded up into that Bearcat as, you know, they took off that sweatshirt that you mentioned as he's shirtless being loaded up into that Bearcat. He's being brought to the Avondale facility, the Pennsylvania State facility in Avondale right now. So that is where Cavalcante is going. You mentioned that we're going to learn a lot more from Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens coming up at 9:30, and I'm sure some federal assets will be there as well. This has been just all hands on deck for the past 14 days. And just thinking back at all the different parts of this manhunt, Cavalcante breaks out 2 weeks ago. He breaches the first perimeter when the trail camera captured him at Longwood Gardens, just south of the original perimeter. So authorities then moved south to encircle Longwood Gardens. And then that was the moment that everybody really felt that they were going to capture him, but he was able to sneak past troopers and steal a van from a dairy farm about 3/4 of a mile away from that search perimeter because the keys were left inside that van. And then he brought it here. So that was that's why we're here. This is the last part of this search. The van was dumped about 2 miles from where we are right now. And the questions were at the time, was he receiving help? Did he get in another car? Did he steal another car? Or was he still in the area? It turns out he was here ever since late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. And there's just a lot of relief from everybody here in the community. And I'm sure that everyone will be tuned in at 9:30 to see exactly what Pennsylvania State Police share in terms of how exactly he was brought into custody. But we know that his sister, his family is being impacted by this, Bill. His sister is not, or did not cooperate with authorities. She's facing deportation. She was arrested by ICE agents. Of course, Cavalcante is an illegal immigrant himself after being accused of murder in Brazil in 2017 and then coming here and murdering his girlfriend in Pennsylvania in 2021. And prosecutors say that he stabbed her 38 times in front of her 2 young children because she was threatening to tell police about that previous murder in Brazil. So this is just a very dangerous man. He is not going back to the county prison. That was something that was just talked about on our air, I believe, during the Fox and Friends hour. That's not happening. He is being taken to the state facility in Avondale. And they are looking into that prison in Chester County because there's been 2 prison escapes just in the past 3 months using the same exact tactics. So they have a lot to look in there, but what's most important, Bill, is that Cavalcante is captured.
Nate, he apparently had a .22 caliber rifle with him and apparently some ammunition. Don't know if that was ever used. What's remarkable to me is they took him alive, and the amount of people who surround him, Dana, are these employed by the state of Pennsylvania? Did they bring feds into this operation? Because this looks like an Army Ranger unit surrounding him.
Feds were definitely added, but I don't know. Nate, do you know the answer to that question of who's surrounding him there in this video we have of him when he was captured?
So I just briefly saw the video. I can tell you that my source with Pennsylvania State Police says that it was Border Patrol and tactical teams from Pennsylvania State Police that initiated the capture. And then in terms of actually him being loaded up into that Bearcat, the transport vehicle, I'm sure that more resources were brought in for that. But throughout this entire time, it's been all hands on deck. You've had local police as well as obviously state troopers, but then multiple federal agencies. ATF agents have been scouring the cornfields behind me. U.S. Marshals have been involved from the very beginning, as well as, again, Border Patrol. So over 500 law enforcement officers as of yesterday were within the search perimeter. So it has been just a full effort from both local, from local, state, and federal resources.
Yeah, Nate, stand by. Back to you momentarily. We got Ted Williams, Paul Morrow, Joe Cardinelli, and we've got that press conference in 22 minutes where there are going to be all kinds of questions momentarily. Let's begin with you, Paul. You're watching this, and what was your first observation when you saw him pop up on that helicopter shot?
Well, I think, like everybody else, I'm just very, very happy that he's been taken without any other loss of life. This guy really looked like he was all in. This thing was beginning to remind me, if any of you remember, of a guy named Cunanan who went on a cross-country spree with a weapon, and he essentially carjacked his way across the country. He made his way all the way down to Florida, and ultimately what he did was assassinate Gianni Versace, the designer. It's kind of a well-known story, but what struck me is the most recent still shots that we saw of him on the Ring cameras. He's smiling. He doesn't look very concerned. At one point, he even looks like he's mugging for the camera. There was the sense that he almost was enjoying this, and that told me he was all in, and maybe he felt like, you know what, I have nothing to lose, and I'm not going alive. And if he's not going to be taken alive, and now he has a .22 caliber rifle, that really bodes ill. Even if he doesn't have ammo, which I know was one of the big questions, just the threat of the gun means he can get a car, he can do a home invasion, he can coop up in there until he eats, gets rested, etc. It really raised the stakes. The other key I would mention, just to what his mindset might be, is consider this. He gets out, they don't know he's gone for about an hour, right? This, first of all, looks a little bit maybe more planned than I initially thought. I mean, when you see him crab walk up that wall, if you look around his waist, in the back, in the small of his back, it looks like he's got something secreted. It might just be a towel or something so he can get over the razor wire, because that was one of the other big questions I had. But he also may have had some supplies that he got a hold of somehow in the prison, and that kept him sort of going until he got to the Longwood Gardens. Now, Longwood Gardens provided water. It gave him cover, top cover from helicopters, etc. So he's obviously very clever, and he kind of, you know, it looks like he kind of knew what he was doing. But think about this. He then reverses course and goes almost 40 miles north, which means he goes back the way he came. It took him past the prison. So I don't know how close to the prison he actually went, but if you trace his steps, he went back towards where he had been incarcerated. That speaks to a certain level of boldness, confidence, arrogance, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, I have to be honest, I was really beginning to get concerned that this was going to end a lot less peaceably.
Oh.
Before we get to Ted and Joe, I wanted to ask you one other thing because it was a striking image to see. What is the protocol about cutting off the T-shirt?
Yeah, so I think that they were very concerned. First of all, he was already cuffed, right? So getting the T-shirt off was going to be, a real pain, for lack of a better term. And I think that just no matter how much they had searched him, they wanted to just make sure he didn't have something secreted. And you have to be, they impress this upon you in academies. I'm sure the same thing with these cops. You're not going to be sort of bashful about doing the search here. You're going to search everywhere you need to, okay? Now he's going to go be examined. He may go to the hospital even for a cavity search. I mean, I don't know, but I can just tell you that guys like this who are so desperate, they're on the run, et cetera, you have to really make sure that they don't have something, even... Yeah, I mean, I've had instances where the perp has a razor blade secreted in their mouths, okay? You would think, how could you do that? They can do it. And they have this little trick they do with their tongue. They go like that, and boop, it comes out. And now they have access to a razor blade, all right? So you got to really be careful. They're clever. They, the stakes are very high for them. So I think they just want to do a very fulsome search. They were taking some photos as well. I think they probably want to get photos of his tattoos, et cetera. And, there's one other thing that just occurs to me. I don't know which personnel were there, but a lot of this personnel, they're no longer going to have access to him. All right? If you're a Fed, let's say, right, and you were assisting in this case, now he's going to likely go over to the local cops, and he's going to be processed, he's going to be reincarcerated and resentenced, et cetera. This may be the last access they had to him, and so a bunch of people were taking photos. They might want to document his tattoos and all of that
Okay,
stuff.
all right, we'll wait for more answers on that. Paul, stand by. You're going to ride shotgun with us. Ted Williams, good morning. Welcome to our coverage. Maybe a lot of questions in about 18 minutes, Ted. What is your first question?
Well, my first question that I want to know is, how did they allow this guy to get out of that prison? Now, we know how he crab walked up, but there had been a prisoner before this guy made that escape that had made a similar mistake or escape. And you would have thought that law enforcement would have been on their P's and Q's. But I got to tell you, this is great news. This is what I defined yesterday as a game changer. And yesterday, my game changer was the fact that he had now gotten a weapon. But for the folk in that neighborhood, the pressure is off. I can tell you guys, about 3 weeks ago, I was up at Lincoln University there in Chester County, Pennsylvania. And I knew that the topography, I knew how it was in those woods, and I knew what law enforcement was up against. But they did an excellent job. They have brought this guy to justice. This guy was a killer, killed his girlfriend in front of children, and also killed another man. And what I was deeply concerned about, that at any time, this guy could kill again, especially after he had gotten that gun out of that garage. So I'm happy the way that this ended, should I say, but there is definitely a need for an investigation to make sure this doesn't happen again. But let's salute state, local, and federal law enforcement who went in those woods and stayed in those woods until they were able to bring this man to justice. And I'm so happy that they were able to contain him in one of the 2 perimeters that they had set up.
Thank you, Ted. And Joe Cardinale is joining us now, too. And the coordination amongst the state, local, and the federal forces here in order to bring him to justice was quite incredible. I know you've had experience with that, Joe.
Yes, the fact that they just let out just enough to let the public know, to protect the public safety, to protect the cops and everything. But they had an idea. They went around the perimeter. The dogs, we spoke about the dogs before, those canine, they're only as effective as, the handlers can let them be in that environment, meaning it's a hot day. They have to look at the size of the dog's tongue to make sure that they're not, overheating, which happened a lot this summer with a lot of other things. But, the nexus in jail with these prisoners is it's very much alive. He can go into that prison and get all the information he needs and gets all the help from within. When you talk about somebody that Paul was touching on the fact that they have nothing to lose, Dana. They have absolutely nothing to lose. If you go back to 1981, I know it's a long time ago, but it's a prime example of the mindset from then till now. We had Lieutenant Jan Brinkers, who was killed off duty by one of the Cuban flotilla perps that up in the Bronx. And when they got him in custody, they said, "What are you going to do to us? You're going to put us in jail? You're going to feed us? You're going to put clothes on us? You know, that's nothing compared to what Castro does to us. So go ahead." So they have no fear of our prison system. They have no fear of our criminal justice system, and they come here and they're dangerous. And how many more Cavalcantes are out there right now? How many more that snuck across the border that we don't know anything about? That's the situation we have to address. And as Ted said, which is correct, now the investigation, that investigation's been going in. How do we tighten up the security here? Well, you have to break up the nexus within the jails, too, of how they, coincide with one another over there, and they help each other out. He probably told somebody, "I got to get out of here." And they said, "Well, this is what this guy did." And they probably aided him. So they'll go into that part of the investigation as well.
Yeah, apparently, Joe, he was reaching out to people he knows. The quote is that he was desperate, reaching out to people with whom he hasn't spoken to in years. Another person he reached out to was Cavalcante's sister. She was not cooperating, and now she faces the strong possibility of deportation. Paul had mentioned one case a moment ago. I think the one case, Dana, that comes to mind about those who run off in the woods and hide for a long time is Eric Robert Rudolph in the woods of North Carolina. Yeah. He did it for some time.
For a long time, right?
Yeah, and eventually he was apprehended in the back of, I think, a strip shopping mall.
He had a lot of help, though, right?
Yeah, well, he was going through a dumpster at night one time, and that's when they spotted him. I don't know how much help he had in the mountains, but Joe, do we know how much help this guy had? Because based on the amount of resources they have, and yeah, it's a wooded area, but still, it's only 35 miles west of Philadelphia. 14 days to some people might seem like a long time. What do you think about that observation, Joe?
14 days is a long time, and the fact that his sister wasn't cooperating, they might deport her, good. That's one less problem we have to worry about in the future. But the fact that this man was out there, he, like I said, he's desperate. He has nothing to lose. That's the most dangerous component of this case. Then he becomes armed. And we said all along he was going to change his appearance. He's going to try to get some kind of transportation, whether it be by hijacking a car or doing what he did, stealing a car. So he was setting himself up. He changed his appearance. He shaved. He got clothes. So he was comfortable in his little environment, and he was little by little going out there. I think the state police, with all the forces that were joining with them from the outside, knew the area where they had to go, and they started concentrating on that, and they started focusing on just securing the public safety first, and then moving in and letting him just expire to the point that they could make a move, or that he was going to come out and into custody the way they did. If you notice in the photo there, I believe they did recover the .22 rifle, because that you could see it with the flashlight mounted on it. That was part of the pictures that they were taking.
Paul Morrow is still with us, and I have to tell you, here's a statement from the Chester County Commissioner, who says that changes have already been made to prison security. Well, I should hope so. Yeah. Because the same escape happened before. That guy had been captured. This one didn't. The enormous cost of this in money, taxpayer dollars, plus the schools that had to close, people losing sleep. Like there's a lot of cost that goes into this, and I would imagine that these security measures at the prison have to change. This is really outrageous.
Yeah, it was. I mean, think about just the closing of the Arboretum alone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big facility. People go there, for recreation. And yeah, I'm sure they're already doing a very heavy scrub. They already fired one corrections officer, so they knew, look, we got a real problem here. We got to take swift action. There will be, I'm sure, a lot further adjustments, because 2 is inexcusable. But we've seen, it feels to me like we've seen a number of these. Look at the Epstein case. Could anybody have been more of a high-profile prisoner? And yet, what was done there? I heard about a couple of transfers. I didn't hear about anybody being fired. I didn't hear about any radical new protocols to make sure this doesn't happen. Let me speak up for the corrections officers. That's a tough job, all right? You're in those prisons night and day. You're dealing with the prisoners. You know they hate you. You know that they have hostile intent. And just like the police departments are shorthanded, corrections is extremely shorthanded. I know New York City is shorthanded in their corrections department, hundreds, if not thousands, of uniformed officers. And so what you do have is people working extra hours, they're tired, they get sloppy, and you know, you have to pay them overtime, which is also expensive. We just have a uniformed recruitment problem in this nation. I'm not saying I know that that's what this came down to, because I don't.
But you're right. It's a great point. And we see this over and over again. And it's not just in Pennsylvania. It's across this country that there was the defund police movement, but it's also been a recruitment issue. And we have to recognize that these jobs are very difficult for people. But also then the jobs of trying to track somebody down in 100-degree heat, in 90% humidity, over a huge area that is heavily wooded, and with a lot of the bugs, the water. I mean, just the amount of the cost of this is just enormous. Obviously, a good result. They got him. Nobody else was injured, and he will. I don't think he'll ever see the light of day again.
Hopefully. I mean, you would think that one of the options that would be on the table here at some point would be deportation. But you know, I have no idea how this is going to go. Very often, what happens is that on the state level, if a person is going to be in jail for a long time and deportation is on the table, especially in a case like here where Brazil already has an arrest warrant for him and he's going to go to jail in Brazil, the thinking domestically is, well, why should we feed and clothe this guy for the rest of his life? Because we can send him someplace else. So that very well may happen here. It'll have to work its way through the system. But I've had a couple of cases where somebody went to jail here. You got a nice sentence. You know, everybody was doing God's work. It felt like a victory. And then the person got deported, and you had to say to yourself, well, you know, I hope he gets incarcerated back home, because I don't know, you know, at that point you go blind. So at some point I would suspect that, you know, he'll be going back to Brazil to face the music there, but obviously he's got plenty of music here to face as well.
Let's bring Ted Williams back into our conversation. Ted, the escape went undetected for more than an hour until guards took a head count. The tower guard on duty was fired. We now have a statement from the Chester County Commissioner in Pennsylvania talking about changes that have been made. Dana referred to it. Here's the statement. Chester County prison officials have made some immediate changes to bolster security in the prison, have brought in security contractors and make permanent changes to the exercise yards, and are reviewing and, where needed, changing procedures for both security measures and communication to residents who live close to the prison. Ted, your reaction on that? Some of this is to be expected, clearly.
Well, Bill, I'm glad that they are making those changes. Those changes are necessary and proper. But I can tell you, both Joe and Paul will tell you that some of the smartest people in the world are locked up in prisons. And so they are always trying to find ways to get out. Now, you know, what this brings me to mind of is when Griff Jenkins and I were up in Dannemora, New York, where they had 2 escaped prisoners and they were out in those woods forever. But the one thing that we have found in all of these cases is that law enforcement are not going to stop until they bring some kind of a prisoner like this to justice. I can tell you this past weekend, I was on with Arthel Neville, and I said that the 2 things that were necessary here were the 2 P's, and that was patience and the ability to continue to put pressure in that area. And this is what law enforcement did. They had to have been patient because this guy kept bobbing up every now and then. And he also was able to make phone calls, was able to get in the homes, steal a weapon, and to be out there. But they continued to put the pressure on this guy. And as a result of putting pressure on him, they were able to bring this guy to justice. But I got to tell you guys, I did not think it was going to end this way. I thought that pretty much that this guy certainly could have been killed as a result of having now found that gun in that garage.
Well, the perimeter was significant. It was about 2 miles, well, 3 miles east to west and 2 miles north to south. And there had been at least 500 law enforcement engaged in trying to secure that area. Back to Joe Cardinale. What do you think we're going to hear in a couple minutes when the briefing gets underway?
I think you're going to hear how the efforts were coordinated, how everybody worked together, and that they had an idea, and that they executed that idea by putting the personnel in that area. And I'll tell you, Bill, something else you have to wonder about is the jails. I know you brought up a great point about the personnel, about how they don't have enough personnel. When I had the Brooklyn South Gang Unit, we were in touch with the prisons, especially where prisoners were going into a certain prison. We wanted to know the nexus in that prison. You know, they would watch the look at the tattoos, document everything. We had a case with the Latin King where the only result for him was to be totally out of contact with anybody. So they put him out in the desert someplace in a little 4x4 square down under the ground, and he had limited access to, because while he was in prison, he was still, you know, making hits from prison. So when they go to, as Ted said, when they go into these systems, it's like a college for them. All right, they actually go in, they have all the help they need. They have their professors in college. They learn more, and they just, you know, expound on their criminal activity, because that's the greatest place for them. And when they put a mindset like this guy did, I want to get out, they have all the help they need from within. You need more correction officers that work with law enforcement. You need the right personnel inside those prisons. In this day and age, as Paul said, it's so hard to keep, to keep a cap on what we need for personnel, especially in the NYPD. The prisons are the same thing. So it's a round robin effect that we have to address. But until then, until that time comes, if and when it ever does